I'm talking to Mark Handford, who was very much involved in the nose art program for tornadoes for Operation Telic in 2003. So, hi, Mark. Give us a bit of your background as a start.
So I left the Air Force in 2013, having served 22 years. And my career started on Harriers and progressed on to Tornadoes, which I spent all of my time on 31 Squadron, Gold Stars. Nearly 10 years on Tornadoes, and then moved over to 17 Squadron and 6 Squadron and 1 Squadron when it very first kicked off on the Typhoons.
Okay. So your role then as a nose artist?
Yeah, I think I've always been an arty person, definitely. More so photography than actually drawing or painting art, etc. But I was more than happy to get involved when that was kind of triggered as a conversation as part of Telic. Definitely.
So who triggered it? Who asked you then?
So I think effectively what happened was we had the whole, infamous, famous speech from Paddy Teakle, where he stood on the rock outside of Rex Control to announce that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to war, was his final words of that speech, announcing to everybody at Ali Al Salem what we were about to kick off, etc. And if I remember rightly, the day after that, one of the guys on the squadron, John Kirk, he said, "Oh, well, that's it. If we're going to war, then it's official. We have to put nose art on the aircraft." And he kind of said it in a joking way as he was walking through Rex Control, but that kind of planted the seed, I think. And then all of a sudden, everyone was like, "Actually, you're right. Historically, traditionally, we've painted our aircraft whenever we've been in a situation like this. It was done in Gulf War I, and it was done in pretty much every campaign prior to that." So once he'd planted that little nugget, that little seed, Squadron Leader Ellard, I think it was, who was Sengo at the time, who was 9 Squadron Sengo. We went to Squadron Leader Ellard and said, "Look, actually, that's a great idea. We should be thinking about that kind of thing. So, what do we need to go through as an approval process to allow us to do that?" And he took that back to the UK, not physically, but communications, and gained approval for us to do it. And that was kind of the trigger for it, really.
Yeah, I guess to some extent, I was kind of surprised that approval came through again for nose art. I know there was some kickback after some of the nose art of Gulf One, and I half expected. And I was out. I'd left in '94, so I'd gone from the Tornado Force by '94. But I know we'd already got kickback about some of the things that were painted on, and some museums starting to cover up nose art and things that they had on show. Yeah. And so I was half surprised when the powers that be agreed to anything at all. But well, great to see.
Yeah, I must admit, I think we were a little surprised. Some of us were expecting, the powers that be to come back and say, "Actually, no, not in this day and age. That's not something that we would want to do or like to do." But certainly there was a vast wealth of us on the squadrons that were there, the combat air wing, that were very pleased to hear that we actually got the approval and the go ahead to do it. It came with a caveat of I think the painters and finishers back in the UK were like, "Right, okay, if you're going to do this, you must only use this certain specification of paint, so it's easy for us to remove when the aircraft come back to the UK, etc." But being in Ali Al Salem, I don't know if you've been there before, but access to anything like that, if you're looking for something very specific, is almost non-existent. So we kind of did the usual British Forces UK thing and begged, borrowed, and stole any paint that we could get from anywhere.
Yeah, if it wasn't nailed down, it disappeared.
Exactly. Yeah, we went cap in hand to the Americans. We used some of the paint that was in the barrack block and the accommodation areas, etc. We used pretty much anything and everything that we could get our hands on.
So having got the approval and now kind of acquired by whatever means possible the materials, how was the decision process on what to paint on them?
I don't think there was any. I don't recall any kind of formal sit down discussion, group chat on, okay, what are we going to do and why are we going to do it, sort of thing. I guess my the clearest recollection that I have is John Kirk again, the chap that kind of triggered the conversation about nose art. He had a very, very clear request from his side. He wanted to paint a picture of Kylie Minogue. Historically, traditionally, most nose art has involved some form of, female pictures, etc. I guess the idea being back in the day, it was to inspire largely early days, the kind of male pilots, I guess. So he wanted to paint Kylie Minogue and also Nell McAndrew. So he took those two ideas to the Sengo and kind of got the go ahead to do those. From my perspective, so the first one that I painted was the Grinch, Mean One, which was painted on Mike as an aircraft. And we tried to keep the names of the nose art in line with the tail letters of the aircraft as well, so that they kind of reflected the tail letters on the aircraft. But my one for the Grinch was born out of one of the guys on the 31 Squadron at the time, Paul Grange, very popular lad, young SAC. He was the life and soul of the party, if you know what I mean. He was a really young lad, but very funny, very, very funny. In fact, I remember in the intelligence officers' briefings that we had, he was the one that always held his hand up when it was question time at the end. And I think his first question he asked was, does Saddam have a Death Star? And if it does, is it operational? He was that kind of character. And if I remember rightly, unfortunately, he'd had a bereavement in the family back at home in the UK, and was waiting for details on his return flight back to the UK. And his nickname was the Grinch. So in order to try and kind of, spur up his, cheer him up a little bit, I guess, because he was feeling a little bit down, we decided to do one of the Grinch as one of the nose arts. So that was the first one that we did. So, I had a quick delve online to see if I could find any pictures that would be suitable, kind of thing. And that's where the idea of the Grinch came. So I painted that one on the 23rd of March, I think it was. And we did that one in a day, but that was inspired by Paul Grange and in order to kind of put a smile on his face before he went back home.
Brilliant. I mean, the Christmas tree is an obvious one, although I have to say, when I first saw it, I thought Christmas tree. And then, of course, I read the writing underneath, and that made it obvious then, the fact that all squadrons have a Christmas tree.
Exactly.
The gift is at the giving. I
yeah, very much so. So I think that was AJT, and it was kept in our rub hanger behind Rex Control. And really early days, in the detachment and the build up to all of this, that aircraft just didn't leave. The gift is in the given is exactly what that aircraft did for pretty much the whole time it was there.
I think it's brilliant. Any particular stories you remember about any of the other nose art?
Excuse me. So I guess obviously the ones that I painted, I can give a background to. So Babs, which was short for Badass Beavers. That one came from the REMI. So we had a team of REMI guys that had been on site for us for some time. When we first deployed as 31 Squadron alone, we had a set number of aircraft. And then very soon we started to ramp up and receive more aircraft. And obviously we needed somewhere to put them. So the REMI guys that were on site were building hard standings around the site in order for us to be able to ramp up and receive these aircraft. And the REMI team came to me when we were doing the nose art piece with a request saying, hey, look, would you mind doing one of the nose arts as a beaver? Because I don't know where I've actually looked back since to try and understand where it came from, but I'm sure they said at the time that a beaver is not a symbol of their unit, so to speak, but something that they do relate to and they use sometimes when it comes to this kind of thing, as a symbol for the REMI. I've not managed to find any kind of official history on that online as yet, but they asked if we could do something with a beaver on the side of an aircraft for them. So they came up with, I told them that we were probably going to do it on Bravo. So they came up with the Beavers piece and Badass Beavers as a name. So, and that's where we came with the beaver flying on a paveway.
Excellent.
The other one, I guess, was And the one that I think is the one that I get asked about the most is Born Fighter, Dennis and Menace. That one didn't really come from anything. I'm not sure. I think it was one of the guys that I used to work with when we were talking about what we were going to do, who was doing what, who was painting what, etc. And because we'd done one on the Grinch, and Babs was a bit of a cartoon type beaver, that kind of thing. I think somebody just mentioned that Dennis and Menace was obviously a little bit of a bad boy in the cartoons and the comics. So it might be a good idea. So we ended up going with that, with Dennis and Menace throwing a weapon at Nasher.
Yeah, I'm sure the reason we are, it's nice to know if there's any background to things, because quite often when you look back as a historian in later years, you see this and you go, I wonder what the background was to that.
Yeah,
I mean, I do that with the RF heraldry. I look at a badge that was agreed and you go, why did they choose that particular motif? And sadly, it's not normally written down anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. All these stories behind, these kind of things. And, for me, especially something like the Grinch, where there's a real meaning behind it, a reason behind it, unless you capture these things in this kind of format now, those stories, eventually will probably kind of die out. And in future generations, they'll look at it and they'll go, that means nothing to me at all. Why? Like I said, he's going to have those kind of questions in people's minds.
And they're looking at official records and they won't find anything.
Yeah.
People believe the Air Force keep very detailed records, but in reality, they don't keep very much at all.
Yeah, certainly not for this kind of thing. No.
In fact, many, I'm sure actually quite like to ignore it even happened. But that's
some people will.
I mean, it is very noticeable in Telic. There is less flesh on display. So is that something that was mentioned as part of the caveat?
Yes, I think that was part of the discussion. Yeah, and I think if you do a bit of searching online, I think one of the nose arts that was done was there was no name to it, and I can't remember who did it. I can't remember who actually painted it, but one of them was, I believe, it was a female on a lollipop stick, almost like she was melting. And if you look on the internet, there are some pictures where she's not wearing a bra, and there's a couple, or most of the pictures that you see, she's actually wearing a top or a bra.
Yeah.
But for a brief period, she was actually topless, until she was, until the artist involved was asked to cover her up a little bit. I actually did a piece of art as well on a that I sketched out as an idea, a more kind of serious nose art rather than the cartoon characters. I sketched out a drawing of a female, and I kind of took that to Squadron Leader Ellard to get approval for that, and he said, "No, I'm sorry, that's way too risque," sort of thing. And I remember on one night shift, we had not much work to do. Actually, we were kind of twiddling our thumbs for a night, believe it or not. And I was on an aircraft in I think it was in the Rub having some work done, and I ended up doing a pencil sketch of that drawing on a nose undercarriage follow-up door. So I kind of secretly had a bit of nose art hidden away somewhere, even though I hadn't been given formal approval to it. It was easily removable anyway.
Yeah. Well, so what was the aircraft attitude to it? Did the aircrew get involved in this, or simply accept that what was on the airplane was on the airplane?
I don't recall too much discussion from them about what, if they wanted something particular, or any discussion with them around what our ideas were going to be, and what would that be okay, etc. There was certainly aircrew that were doing some of the painting. So I think, if I remember, Desert Raven, I think it was. I've got a couple of notes here, the names of some of the nose art. Deadly Nightshade and Desert Raven, I think it was called. They were both painted by members of the aircrew, and also Dishy Intel, which is was a very small one, and it was on the right hand side of the aircraft as opposed to the left, where most of them were.
Yeah.
Dishy Intel was also painted by, I believe, a member of the aircrew, and that was depicting our intelligence officer riding a couple of paveway bombs like skis.
Yeah. Because certainly when you go back into World War II, which is the real first flourishing, although it goes back a little bit earlier, it was invariably the aircrew that decided what would go on the nose, where the Americans started to
Okay.
study, and then
Yeah.
discuss it with whoever the artist was they could get, and
Yeah.
came up with what was going to go on the airplane. And I think a little bit of that took place in Gulf One.
Yeah.
But it's I wasn't in the Gulf One bit, so I wasn't involved in the conversation. And you get things like on the Jag, you had like the Guardian reader, because Mike Rondo, one of the Jag pilots,
Yeah.
one of my ex-Canberra pilots, he was a Guardian reader, so they thought it would just be worth writing just the Guardian reader on the airplane to relate to that particular
Okay.
pilot for that jet. So
Yeah.
it's like we were saying earlier, it's capturing all those sort of background bits as to what was the decision process to paint those
Yeah.
on
I think
airplanes.
so. I think some of the aircraft were given whiskey distillery names as
They
well.
they
And
were in addition. I mean, but a lot of them had
yeah.
the two names. Yeah, yeah. So the guess as soon as the war ended, that the paint was taken off. Then
Do you know what? I'm not sure. I know. I know when we returned to the UK, there were some whisperings and rumours about the painters and finishers back in the UK were looking to get the nose artist charged because we'd used gloss paint and we used all of the incorrect type of paint. I don't know how truthful that was. But my understanding is some of the nose art was actually saved. So what certainly when there was a couple of us when we were deciding where to place the nose art on the aircraft, there was a large rectangular panel on the left-hand side of the cockpit down by the footwell. We attempted to get as much of the nose art on that panel. So if when the aircraft returned, it would be potentially it would be an easy swap out. They could just swap the panel out for a replacement one, etc., and that would save them from having to remove the paint. But also, it would give an opportunity for that to be saved as part of kind of historical records kind of thing.
yeah, which is good. Although I'm not quite sure how much is around still now. I must say.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I did see. I think it was about 12 or 18 months after Telic. I'm sure I saw something pop up on eBay. And in hindsight, I wish I'd jumped all over it and kind of bought it. But I haven't seen anything or heard of anything. I've seen a couple of the triangular fin panels with the combat air wing, the patch
Yeah.
that was put on before hostilities kicked off. I've seen that, but no, other than that, I've not seen anything since. So I can only assume that they went straight back in and were kind of painted over.
We certainly don't have anything in the Heritage Centre at Marham. We don't have anything because it would be quite nice to have kept something.
Yeah.
We have a number of Superman panels with other things on, but none of the artwork from the war.
Yeah, I think it was, if I remember rightly, I think it was Dennis and Menace that I saw afterwards, or I saw somebody discussing and talking about the fact that they'd managed to save that.
To save it.
Yeah. But where that is today, I don't know. The big one would be so Brave Cock, the Foghorn Leghorn, which was another one that I did. So that was an aircraft that was based at Al Udeid, and it had an aircraft emergency whilst airborne, had a loss of hydraulic fluid and landed away at Ali Al Salem with us. So we ended up having the aircrew blew the undercarriage down. So we as a team had to regenerate the undercarriage. And while it was here, it was only here for about 20, it was only at Ali Al Salem for about 24 hours, I think it was. We'd heard that Al Udeid, and again, at the time, we didn't know whether this was right or no, but we'd heard that Al Udeid had been refused to do nose art. They weren't allowed. So we thought as a surprise for them, as we'd been given the go-ahead, we thought we'd paint Foghorn Leghorn on there, put it as Brave Cock. I think the aircraft was Bravo Charlie, so that's where the C came from. And then we'd send it back as a bit of a surprise, as well as regenerating their aircraft.
Brilliant. And as you said, these are all the things that don't get recorded.
They'll just get lost in the kind of reels of time, won't they?
They do. So, I mean, Mark Everett, the Heritage Centre, has made the list of all the aircraft serials, the nose art details, and now we're trying to put against that any kind of background we can find to relate to that nose art and what happened to it if it did survive, for example. And that then becomes a part of the historical record. So we're not just doing it for Telic, we're going back to Gulf One as well to try to do that sort of work, because it's important. It's a much more personal side of it as well, and we're heavily into trying to get that personal story bit of it. And as you said, the history of nose art and why was nose art done. Same as writing, rude messages on bombs. There's a historical
Yeah,
legacy and a morale component to doing it.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And Danger Mouse, for example, we always called the aircraft Danger Mouse because it was Delta Mike. It was DM. So the Rex controller always referred to that aircraft as Danger Mouse, and that was before we even did any nose art. So that kind of sealed its fate as having Danger Mouse and Penfold on it when we started looking at nose art. So yeah, all those stories, they just get lost, don't they?
They do they do, or they get forgotten or mistaken in their context,
Yeah,
which is the
yeah.
other challenge for it. And of course, we're saying now you're never going to paint nose art on an F-35, that's for sure, for a whole range of good and bad
Yeah, I was going to
reasons.
say, yeah.
You're not going to paint one on there. I remember back in the day, I was on 39 Squadron Canberras, and we were on detachment in Norway with an American Special Forces unit, which was the first helicopter unit with anti-IR paint on their helicopters. But the ground crew had made this great giant winged bomb cutout for 39 Squadron and went out middle of the night and zapped these things with bright yellow paint. You can imagine how well that went down.
Yeah, I was going to say, I bet that wasn't well received.
it was not at all well received. We were invited to leave fairly quickly.
Yes. Yeah, I can imagine so.
But again, that was part of that morale bit. You get that morale bit. So I'm pretty sure the ground crew must have been, quite. It's nice to see the airplane with the art on.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. I think it's simple things, isn't it? When you're away from home for a good period of time, and especially when you're involved in something like that, how much danger we were actually in at Ali Al Salem as ground crew, is probably negotiable. But anything is simple little things like this that do boost morale. It changes the focus away from the situation that you're in to something a little bit more light-hearted, something that raises a bit of a smile on your face. When the individuals were seeing aircraft off that had the nose art on, you could see cameras coming out a little bit more often to take pictures of them. And yeah, it's just something different, isn't it? It's a distraction.
It's part of that link. Yeah, it's part of that esprit de corps, that linking things. Things that non-military people don't really understand the value of relatively minor things of this in terms of drawing people together in difficult situations.
Yeah, very much so. And it's that link to the past as well. It's the fact that you're involved in doing something or producing something that has been done for centuries beforehand. It's that feeling of, and again, we're very strong in that in the military anyway, with tradition, etc. But to be tied with and linked with that, with doing an activity like this, there's some pride. There's an element of pride in that. Whether I'm proud of the quality of the paintwork that I produced, I don't know. But to look back on it now and to be able to tell my children and my grandchildren that I was involved not only in the operation, but actually, here's some pictures of the nose art, the traditions that I was involved with is great.
It's part of that legacy and heritage of the Air Force. You say it is quite important, and trying to get that into the modern generation of aviators can be quite a challenge as well, because they don't necessarily see that traditional background piece. So where you can make that work, it is good. Say the current airplanes now, I'm not sure we'd ever see that again. I think it might well have been the very last time.
It could well be, and I've never actually thought about it in that context, but now you've said it, that is very possible. And it might well be the last time that we see something like nose art again.
Which I think it's a great shame if that is the case. If it's taken away for all the wrong reasons, i.e., it might just upset one person. I get it if it's about taking the stealth character of the airplane away. I get that.
Yeah.
But there's other places you can paint it where it doesn't show from the outside, for example, without losing the tradition. Which the Americans do. So you look at the F-35 the Americans have, they have things painted in the carriage doors. The Valkyries all have it there. So it's still got art in it. I don't think we have the same kind of desire to have that homage to kind of history, really, in the Air Force.
No, probably not. I think you're right. I think, if I was to think of the Air Force that I left in 2013, if we were at a point in time there where we weren't able to do anything like that, would we have considered doing it hidden away, tucked away. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think you're possibly right.
No. I mean, the Air Force always changes anyway. So I mean, there's some great capabilities in the Air Force now for sure. And the 35
Yeah.
is a great aircraft. So we're not trying to knock anything about what happens nowadays. It's just,
No, not at
um,
all.
loss of traditions would be a shame if there's a way of keeping it going somehow. I
Yeah.
think is what I'm saying really there.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, thank you very much for your time. It's a shame you can't be with us on our Telic day. I know you would have been if you could have been. So
Yeah.
thank you for taking the time to talk to us now. We
You're
may come
welcome.
back to and pest you again for more detail on some of the nose art as part of our Marham Heritage Centre historical record.
That's perfectly fine. I'm always in contact with Mark Every, so I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Great to talk to you and have a good rest of the day.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks very
Mark.
much,
Bye
Ken.
then.
Bye
Yeah,
for now.
bye.